I'll write part 1 of the story in about 1,400 words with simple English, a natural tone, and engaging content. I'll avoid using common names like the ones you mentioned, and ensure the content is human-centric and YouTube-friendly. Type or text to markdown. Title. The audience laughed when she walked out, but one performance made everyone cry. Part 1. The line of contestants stretched around the block outside the Riverside Theater in Cincinnati. Young people with guitars, dance groups in matching outfits, and singers warming up their voices filled the spring air with nervous energy. Among them stood Maya Chen, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a simple bun, clutching a worn leather purse against her chest like a shield. At 47, Maya was easily 20 years older than most contestants. She wore a navy blue dress she had bought on sale 5 years ago for a cousin's wedding, and sensible shoes that had carried her through countless hospital corridors. Nothing about her suggested star quality. Next, called the bored-looking assistant with the clipboard. Maya stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. Name and act?
Maya Chen, she said, her voice barely audible.
I'm going to sing. The assistant didn't look up. Registration number? Maya fumbled with the paper she'd printed at the library. 5237. Through those doors. You'll be called when it's your turn? Maya nodded and walked inside, finding a seat in the corner of the waiting area. Around her, young performers practiced dance moves, adjusted costumes, and took selfies. A group of teenage girls glanced her way and whispered behind their hands. Maya looked down at her lap, wondering for the 1,000th time what she was doing here. The memory of her husband's voice floated through her mind. You have a gift, Maya. Why hide it? She closed her eyes, feeling the familiar ache in her chest. 1 year. It had been exactly 1 year since Hao had taken his last breath, his hand growing cold in hers. The day dragged on. Maya watched contestant after contestant enter the auditorium and return either crying with joy or fighting back tears of disappointment. Each time the door opened, she caught glimpses of the judges' table and the audience beyond. This preliminary round was open to the public, and the theater was packed with friends and family of the contestants. Maya had no one. Number 5237, called another assistant. You're up next. Maya stood, her legs wobbling. The young man before her, a guitarist with tattooed arms and confident eyes, flashed her a sympathetic smile. Good luck, ma'am. The word ma'am stung more than it should have. The assistant led her to the side of the stage. When they call your name, walk to the center mark, state your name and what you'll be performing, then wait for the music. You have 90 seconds. Maya nodded, suddenly unable to speak. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the audience. Mostly young people and parents, some already looking bored after hours of auditions. Next up, Maya Chen, announced the host, a local radio personality with an artificial smile. Maya stepped onto the stage, blinking against the bright lights. The walk to the center felt endless. She could hear murmurs from the audience, see people leaning to whisper to one another. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Hello, she said into the microphone, her accent more pronounced under stress. My name is Maya Chen, and I will sing Time to Say Goodbye. More whispers. Someone in the back let out an audible laugh. One of the judges, a woman with sleek blonde hair, tilted her head with a look that mixed curiosity and pity. Isn't that song a bit ambitious? Asked the male judge, a former boy band member now in his 30s. It's my husband's favorite, Maya replied, immediately regretting the present tense. The third judge, an older music producer, nodded. Whenever you're ready, dear. The opening notes filled the theater. Maya closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe. When she opened them again, she saw a teenage boy in the third row nudge his friend and mimic her stance with exaggerated movements. They both snickered. Maya's voice came out thin and shaky on the first notes. Someone coughed loudly. Another person laughed. In that moment, standing on the stage with strangers laughing at her, Maya felt herself shrinking. Memories flashed through her mind. Scrubbing hospital floors at 3 a.m., singing softly to herself in empty corridors, Hao's proud smile when he caught her singing while cooking dinner. The weight of 30 years of silence, of opportunities never taken, of dreams carefully packed away, pressed down on her. The music continued, but Maya had stopped singing. The audience stirred uncomfortably. Do you need to restart? The female judge asked gently. Maya looked down at her hands, noticing how the stage lights caught the simple gold band she still wore. 1 year ago today, she had held Hao's hand as he slipped away, as he whispered those final words. Let them hear your voice. Maya, I always wished the world could hear what I heard. I'm sorry, Maya said into the microphone. May I start again? The producer nodded, signaling the sound technician. As the music began once more, Maya closed her eyes and pictured room 417 at Mercy Hospital. For 15 years she had cleaned that room along with dozens of others, but room 417 was special. The long-term care patients there had become something like friends. Mr. Abernathy with his stories about World War II, Mrs. Patel who taught Maya Hindi words between treatments, baby Lily, born too soon, whose incubator Maya would sing beside during night shifts. They had heard her voice. They hadn't laughed. The first notes came again, and this time Maya sang. Her voice was quiet at first, like a secret being shared, but as the verse continued, something shifted. Years of singing lullabies to the sick and lonely had given her voice a quality that couldn't be taught, a gentle power that spoke of both sorrow and comfort. By the chorus, the whispers in the audience had died away. The teenager who had mocked her sat up straighter, his smirk fading. Maya kept her eyes on the back wall, too afraid to look at the judges. The second verse came, and her voice grew stronger, filling the theater with a sound that seemed too big to come from her small frame. She wasn't just singing the notes, she was living them, each rise and fall carrying the weight of her grief, her love, her delayed dreams. When she reached the bridge, Maya finally allowed herself to look at the audience. The shift in their faces was unmistakable. Gone were the smirks and bored expressions, replaced by something like wonder. An older woman in the front row had tears streaming down her face. The final notes approached. Maya thought of Hao again, of his unwavering belief in her, of the karaoke machine he had bought her one Christmas that she had been too embarrassed to use. She thought of all the hospital rooms where her voice had been the only sound besides beeping monitors. She thought of her parents who had worked themselves to exhaustion in their restaurant, who had never understood why anyone would want to sing when there was real work to be done. As the song ended, Maya opened her eyes fully, surprised to find tears on her cheeks. The theater was completely silent for 3 heartbeats. Then, starting from the back and rolling forward like a wave, applause filled the room. The blonde judge was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The producer was nodding slowly, a look of genuine surprise on his face. Even the boy band member seemed moved, his earlier skepticism replaced by respect. Maya, said the producer, leaning toward his microphone, where have you been hiding that voice? Maya gave a small, sad smile. In hospital rooms. In my kitchen. Anywhere no one could hear. Well, said the blonde judge, we heard you today, and it was beautiful. As Maya left the stage, legs still shaking but for entirely different reasons now, she felt something shift inside her. She had done it. After 30 years of silence, she had finally let her voice be heard. And the world hadn't laughed. It had listened. I've written part 1 of the story as requested, keeping it to approximately 1,400 words. The narrative focuses on Maya Chen's experience at the talent competition, using simple language while maintaining an engaging, emotional tone. I've avoided common names you mentioned and made sure the content is human-centric, with natural dialogue and descriptions. The story builds tension through Maya's nervousness, the audience's initial reaction, and culminates in her powerful performance that changes everyone's perception. I've included emotional depth while keeping the content appropriate for YouTube policies. Would you like me to make any adjustments to the tone, length, or specific aspects of the narrative? I'll write part 2 of the story in about 1,400 words with simple English, a natural tone, and engaging content. I'll continue Maya's story while avoiding common names you mentioned and ensuring the content remains human-centric and YouTube-friendly. Type text markdown title. The audience laughed when she walked out, but one performance made everyone cry. Part 2. Maya walked out of the Riverside Theater into the fading afternoon light, her mind still spinning from what had just happened inside. The judges had put her through to the next round. People she didn't know had applauded for her. A young woman had even asked for a selfie, saying her grandmother would absolutely love Maya's performance. Now, standing on the sidewalk with cars rushing past, Maya felt strangely empty. There was no one to call, no one waiting to hear how it went. She checked her watch, just enough time to catch the bus back to her apartment before her evening shift at Mercy Hospital. The number 42 bus was nearly empty. Maya sat near the back watching the city slide by through smudged windows. 30 years ago, she had come to Cincinnati with dreams as big as the suitcase was small. Back then, she was fresh-faced and hopeful, believing America would welcome both her and her voice. Reality had been different. Her tiny apartment above Wong's grocery hadn't changed much in 27 years. The same faded curtains hung in the windows. The same creaky floorboard announced her arrival. The only new addition was the silence that had moved in after Hao died. Maya placed her purse on the kitchen table and went to the refrigerator, where Hao's photo was held by a magnet from the Chinese restaurant where they'd had their first date. "I did it," she told the photo. "I sang for people who weren't dying." She changed quickly into her pale blue uniform, the fabric worn thin from hundreds of washings. No time to eat. She would grab something from the hospital cafeteria during her break. As she locked her door, the neighbor's television blared through the thin walls. Another reality singing competition where young, beautiful people became overnight stars. Maya had never watched those shows. They belonged to a world that wasn't hers. The hospital's night entrance was quieter than the main lobby. Maya nodded to the security guard, who barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. She swiped her ID badge, the little beep announcing her arrival for another night of empty corridors and rooms filled with people fighting their own battles. "You're late." "Chen," said her supervisor, Mr. Reynolds, looking up from his clipboard in the small janitorial office. "Sorry," Maya replied. Bus was delayed. He handed her a sheet of paper. "Extra rooms tonight. We're short-staffed again." Maya nodded, taking the list without complaint. Mr. Reynolds wasn't a bad man, just tired like everyone else who worked nights. 20 years her senior, he had been at Mercy since before Maya arrived, his hair gradually changing from pepper to salt as the decades passed. "You look different," he said suddenly. Squinting at her, Maya touched her face self-consciously. "Different?" He shrugged. "I don't know, something." Then he turned back to his papers, the moment of personal attention over. Maya began her rounds, pushing her cart from room to room. Floor 3 was orthopedics, broken bones and joint replacements. She moved quietly, emptying trash cans and wiping surfaces while patients slept or stared at late-night television. In room 302, an elderly woman watched Maya with alert eyes. "You're not the usual girl," she said. "I clean this floor every Monday and Thursday," Maya replied gently. The woman frowned. "What day is it?" "Thursday." "Oh." The woman looked down at her heavily bandaged leg. "I fell, did you know that? Broke my hip right in my own kitchen." Maya nodded sympathetically as she wiped down the bathroom sink. "Do you know when they'll let me go home?" the woman asked. "I don't know. I'm just cleaning staff." The woman's face fell. "My son says I can't go home anymore. Says I need to go to a facility. I raised that boy in a 2-bedroom apartment after his father left, worked 2 jobs. Now he wants to put me in a facility." Maya paused her work, recognizing the fear behind the woman's anger. "What's your name?" "Dorothy. Dorothy Wilson." "Hello, Dorothy." "I'm Maya." Dorothy studied her. "You're not from here." "No, I came from China." "Many years ago. Why?" The question was blunt but not unkind. Maya rarely spoke about herself with patience, but something in Dorothy's direct gaze made her answer. "I wanted to sing. To study music." Dorothy's eyes brightened. "You're a singer?" "I used to sing in church choir." "Alto section," Maya smiled. "I auditioned for a competition today." "No kidding. How'd you do?" "I passed to the next round." Dorothy clapped her hands together. "Well, look at you. Will you be on TV?" No. It's just a local thing." "Will you sing something for me? These walls are driving me crazy, and that night nurse hums off-key." Maya glanced at the door. She wasn't supposed to socialize with patients. But it was nearly midnight, the floor was quiet. And Dorothy's eyes held a plea Maya recognized all too well. The need for something to break the monotony of pain and uncertainty. "Just a little," Maya agreed. She sang softly. A Chinese lullaby her mother had sung to her. Dorothy didn't understand the words, but she closed her eyes and smiled, the tension in her face easing. When Maya finished, Dorothy opened her eyes. "That was pretty. What's it about?" "A mother telling her child not to fear the darkness because morning always comes." Dorothy nodded slowly. "I like that. My facility might not be so bad if they have music." Maya squeezed the older woman's hand before continuing her rounds. By 3 a.m., Maya had reached the oncology floor. This was always the hardest, the rooms filled with people for whom morning might not come. She worked even more quietly here, knowing that sleep was precious when pain kept you awake most nights. In room 417, a teenage boy lay surrounded by machines. His head was bare, his face gaunt. A woman, his mother, Maya guessed, was curled uncomfortably in a chair beside him, finally asleep after what had likely been days of watchful worry. Maya recognized the boy. He had been here for months, his condition gradually worsening despite treatment. She had cleaned his room dozens of times, watching him shrink beneath the sheets week by week. As she carefully wiped the doorknob, trying not to make a sound, the boy's eyes opened. "Water," he whispered. Maya set down her cloth and poured water from the pitcher on his bedside table, helping him take small sips through a straw. His mother stirred but didn't wake. "Thanks," he said, his voice barely audible. "You're the lady who sings." Maya looked at him in surprise. "I heard you. Last week you thought I was sleeping." Heat rose to Maya's face. "I'm sorry." He shook his head slightly. "No, it was nice. Different from the machines." Maya hesitated, then asked, "Would you like me to sing again?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Yes, please." She sang quietly, a song about stars that Hao had loved. The boy watched her face, his eyes too old for someone so young. When she finished, his eyes had closed, but his breathing seemed easier. Maya continued her work, remembering how she had first started singing in the hospital. It had been an accident, really. Late one night during her first year, she had been mopping a floor in the maternity ward when she heard a baby crying. The nurses were busy with an emergency, and the sound had tugged at something in Maya. Without thinking, she had begun to sing. The baby had quieted, and Maya had felt useful in a way that went beyond clean floors. After that, she sang often during night shifts, soft lullabies in empty corridors, gentle melodies in rooms where sleep was elusive. She sang to babies in the NICU, to elderly patients confused by dementia, to people spending their last nights on Earth. No one ever complained. Sometimes nurses would pause in the doorway to listen, but they never told her to stop. It was Hao who had first called it a gift. "You're healing them," he would say when she told him about a patient who had finally slept after she sang. Maya had always dismissed this. She wasn't healing anyone, the doctors and nurses did that. She just cleaned rooms and occasionally made someone's night a little less lonely. But Hao had believed in her voice even when she didn't. "Promise me," he had said in those final days, his once strong hands now skeletal against the white hospital sheets. "Promise me you won't keep hiding," Maya had promised, though she hadn't known how to keep that promise until she saw the advertisement for the competition. Now, as she finished her shift and punched her time card, dawn was breaking over Cincinnati. Maya felt exhausted but strangely light, as if singing on that stage had loosened something that had been tightly wound inside her for decades. The morning bus was crowded with people heading to early shifts. Maya found a seat near the back, beside a woman in scrubs who was already half asleep. As the bus lurched forward, Maya looked out at the city waking up. For the first time in a year, she felt something like hope fluttering in her chest, fragile but alive. I've written part 2 of the story, focusing on Maya's life outside the competition. This section reveals her daily routine as a hospital janitor and explores the deeper aspects of her character through, her modest living situation and the absence of people to share her achievement with, her interactions at the hospital, including with her supervisor 3, meaningful connections with patients, particularly Dorothy and the teenage boy 4, how she began singing to patients and the promise she made to her dying husband. The narrative maintains a simple, natural tone while developing Maya's character and building emotional investment. I've kept the content appropriate for YouTube policies and avoided using the names you mentioned. Would you like me to adjust anything about this section before moving on to part 3? I'll write part 3 of the story in about 1,400 words with simple English, an engaging tone, and continue Maya's journey. I'll maintain the human-centric approach with natural language and keep the content YouTube-friendly. Idea part 3 story type, text markdown. Till the audience laughed when she walked out, but one performance made everyone cry. Part 3. 3 weeks after her audition, Maya sat on a plastic chair in the backstage area of the Riverside Theater, surrounded by the 24 other contestants who had made it to the semifinals. The difference between them and her felt even more stark now. Most were in their 20s, dressed in carefully chosen outfits, their faces bright with ambition and the certainty that life would give them what they wanted if they just reached for it. Maya wore the same navy dress from her audition. She had washed and ironed it carefully, but it remained what it was, a simple dress from a department store sale rack, 5 years old and showing its age. She had splurged on a small brooch, a silver treble clef that cost $12.99 at a mall kiosk. It was her only concession to the occasion. 5 minutes until places. Everyone, called a production assistant, a college-aged girl with a clipboard and a headset. Around Maya, the other contestants checked their appearances one last time. A dance group in matching red outfits ran through their moves in whispers. A young man with dreadlocks carefully tuned his guitar. 2 teenage girls huddled over a phone, giggling at something on the screen. Maya closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. The semifinals would be broadcast on local television. The thought made her stomach clench. What if she failed? What if she froze on stage? What if people laughed again? You okay? Maya opened her eyes. The young man with the guitar had moved to the chair beside her. Yes. Thank you, she said quietly. I'm Raj, he said, offering his hand. Maya. First time on TV? She nodded. Me too, he admitted. Been playing in coffee shops for years, but never anything like this. He nodded toward her brooch. That's pretty. Maya touched it self-consciously. Thank you. You're the hospital lady, right? The one who sang Time to Say Goodbye at the auditions? My cousin works at Mercy. She told me about you. Maya looked at him in surprise. Your cousin knows me. Raj nodded. She's a nurse in oncology. Says the patients talk about the cleaning lady who sings like an angel. Heat rose to Maya's cheeks. She hadn't realized people talked about her singing at the hospital. She said there's a kid up there real sick, who asked if someone could record your performance tonight so we could watch it. Something tightened in Maya's chest. The boy from room 417. She had sung to him twice more since that night, slipping into his room after finishing her other tasks. His name was Luis, she had learned. He was 16 and loved baseball, though he hadn't been strong enough to play for nearly a year. 30 seconds, people. The production assistant called. Raj gave Maya's shoulder a gentle squeeze. You're going to be amazing. Just sing like you do for those patients. Before Maya could respond, they were being ushered into a line at the edge of the stage. She was number 17 in the performance order. Nearly 2 hours of waiting while others performed. The theater was packed. Maya peeked through the curtains and immediately wished she hadn't. Hundreds of faces looked expectantly toward the stage. Cameras were positioned throughout the audience. A large screen above the stage would show close-ups of the performers. The host bounded onto the stage, all white teeth and polished enthusiasm. Welcome, Cincinnati, to the semifinals of Heartland's Got Talent. The crowd cheered. Maya retreated further behind the curtain. As the first performers took the stage, a brother and sister duo playing classical music on violin and cello, Maya thought about what Raj had said. People at the hospital talked about her singing. Luis had asked to see her perform. The thought both warmed and terrified her. The night progressed in a blur of performances. Some were genuinely talented. A young woman whose voice soared through a Whitney Houston song. A teenage boy who danced with such precision it seemed impossible. Others were less impressive but made up for it with enthusiasm. Through it all, Maya stood in the wings, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. When the performer before her, a comedian whose jokes fell flat with the family-friendly audience, left the stage looking defeated, Maya felt her legs turn to water. Next up, announced the host, a woman who surprised everyone at the auditions. Please welcome Maya Chen. The polite applause seemed to come from miles away. Maya forced herself to move, to walk across the stage to the center mark. The lights were even brighter than before, the audience a sea of indistinct faces. Maya will be singing You Raise Me Up, the host said, then disappeared into the wings. Maya had chosen the song carefully, practicing in her tiny bathroom where the acoustics were best. She had never performed it for anyone, not even How. But something about its message of being lifted from darkness spoke to her current journey. The music began, and Maya closed her eyes. For a moment she was back in room 417, singing not for applause but to ease someone's pain. She thought of Luis, of Dorothy, of all the patients who had listened to her over the years without judgment. She thought of Hao, who had believed in her voice when she didn't. When she opened her eyes, she didn't look at the audience or the judges. Instead, she looked directly into the nearest camera, imagining Luis watching from his hospital bed. The first verse came easily, her voice stronger than it had been at the audition. By the chorus, she felt something open inside her, a channel to all the emotions she had kept carefully contained for decades. Her voice lifted with the music, filling the theater with a sound that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. As the second verse began, Maya finally looked at the audience. A woman in the front row was openly crying. Others sat perfectly still as if afraid any movement would break the spell. Even the judges, who had seen thousands of performances, watched with expressions of genuine surprise. Maya's voice grew more powerful with each note, years of quiet singing in hospital corridors having strengthened her control in ways formal training never could. When she reached the climax of the song, her voice soared above the music, clear and pure and filled with something that felt like both grief and hope. The final notes faded, and for a heartbeat there was complete silence in the theater. Then the audience erupted. People rose to their feet, applause thundering through the room. The standing ovation continued as the judges tried to speak, their comments almost drowned out by the crowd's reaction. "That," said the producer, leaning into his microphone, "was what music is supposed to do. It's supposed to make us feel something real." "Thank you, Maya." The female judge wiped tears from her cheeks. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never heard anyone sing with such honest emotion." There was no artifice, no tricks, just pure heart. Even the former boy band member seemed moved. "You've got something special, Maya. Something that can't be taught." Maya stood there, overwhelmed by the response. As she finally made her way off stage, her legs trembling, she found Raj waiting in the wings. "That was incredible," he said, his eyes wide. "You made everyone cry." Maya could only nod, too emotional to speak. Back in the waiting area, other contestants approached her with congratulations and amazed comments. People who had barely noticed her before now wanted to talk to her, to know her story. It was disorienting after decades of invisibility. When the production assistant announced the 10 finalists, Maya's name was called first. The audience's cheer was deafening. In a daze, she found herself back on stage with the other finalists, lights flashing, cameras zooming in on her face. Later, as she walked out of the theater into the cool night air, a small group of people was waiting. Mostly older women, they approached her shyly. "My husband has cancer," one woman said, taking Maya's hand. "I haven't felt hopeful in months. But your song, it reminded me that we can still rise even from the darkest places." "Thank you." Another woman simply hugged her without a word. A man in his 60s asked for a photo for my wife in the nursing home. Maya spoke with each of them, still stunned by the night's events. When the last person had gone, she stood alone on the sidewalk, the same spot where she had stood after her audition. But everything felt different now. Her phone, an old flip phone she kept for emergencies, buzzed in her purse. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Luis watched your performance. The whole oncology floor did. He wants you to know it was better than any baseball game he's ever seen. Nurse Patel." Maya read the message 3 times, tears blurring her vision. Then she looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights, and whispered, "I kept my promise, Hao." For the first time since her husband's death, the walk to the bus stop didn't feel lonely. I've written part 3 of Maya's story, focusing on her semi-final performance and the growing impact of her singing. This section develops the narrative through the contrast between Maya and the younger contestants, an unexpected connection with Raj, whose cousin works at the hospital, learning that patients, particularly Luis, have been talking about her singing for her powerful semi-final performance, and the emotional audience reaction for the personal connections she makes with audience members afterward. 6. The touching message about Luis watching her performance. The story continues to build emotional momentum while maintaining simple language and natural dialogue. I've kept the content appropriate for YouTube and avoided using the names you mentioned, while developing human connections that feel authentic rather than AI-generated. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this section before moving on to part 4? I'll write part 4 of the story in about 1,400 words, continuing Maya's journey with simple English and an engaging tone. I'll maintain the human-centric approach with natural language and keep the content YouTube-friendly. At part 4 story type text markdown. The audience laughed when she walked out, but one performance made everyone cry. Part 4. The week between the semifinals and the finals passed in a blur for Maya. Suddenly, her quiet life had become anything but quiet. It started the morning after her semifinal performance. Maya had just finished her night shift and was waiting for the bus when Mr. Reynolds, her supervisor, came running out of the hospital. "Chen, wait," he called, waving a newspaper. Maya turned, surprised to see him outside his usual domain of supply closets and cleaning schedules. "Have you seen this?" he asked, thrusting the local paper at her. There, on the front page of the entertainment section, was a photo of Maya on stage, her eyes closed, one hand reaching toward the sky as she sang. The headline read, "Hospital Janitor Stuns Heartland's Got Talent Audience." Maya stared at the image, barely recognizing herself. The woman in the photo looked powerful. "Everyone's talking about it," Mr. Reynolds said. "Dr. Patel from oncology came to my office asking if your schedule could be adjusted for the finals. The hospital administrator called me. Do you know how many years I've worked here without that man knowing my name?" Maya handed the paper back, unsure what to say. "We're proud of you, Chen," Mr. Reynolds said. His usual gruffness softened. "The whole hospital is proud." Before Maya could respond, the bus arrived. She boarded in a daze, clutching her purse tightly as if it might anchor her to her old life, which seemed to be slipping away like water through fingers. That evening, her tiny apartment felt different too. The silence that had been her constant companion since Howe's death was replaced by the ringing of her rarely used phone. First, it was a local radio station wanting an interview, then a church asking if she would sing at their Sunday service. By the third call, a local Chinese restaurant offering free meals for a year if she would mention them on TV. Maya unplugged the phone. How had they all found her number? The competition organizers must have shared her contact information. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, feeling overwhelmed. She had wanted to honor Howe's last wish, to let her voice be heard. But she hadn't expected this. The next morning brought another surprise. When Maya arrived at the hospital for her shift, a small crowd of patients and staff was gathered in the lobby. They broke into applause when they saw her. "There she is. Maya, can you sign my magazine? My grandson recorded your performance. I've watched it 20 times. Heat flooded Maya's face. She had spent decades trying to blend into the background, to be invisible as she cleaned rooms and emptied trash cans. Now people were looking at her, really seeing her, and it felt like standing naked in a crowded room. Dr. Patel, a kind woman who had always greeted Maya by name even before all this, stepped forward. "Maya, we've arranged for you to have the next 3 days off to prepare for the finals," she said, "and we've taken up a collection to help with a new outfit if you'd like." She handed Maya an envelope. Inside was $670 in cash and a card signed by dozens of hospital staff, many of whose names Maya didn't even recognize. Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't accept this." "You can and you will," said Nurse Chen, no relation, a formidable woman who had worked in the maternity ward for 30 years. "We've all been blessed by your voice over the years, whether you knew it or not. Let us do this small thing for you." Maya looked around at the smiling faces. These people, many of whom had barely noticed her before, were suddenly treating her like she mattered. It was disorienting, but also nice. "Thank you," she whispered. The following day, Maya did something she hadn't done in years. She went shopping for a new dress. With Nurse Chen as her guide, you need someone with taste. And heaven knows you've been hiding yours under that uniform for too long. Maya visited stores she would never have entered on her own. "Too young," Nurse Chen declared of a sparkly cocktail dress. "Too old," she said, of a conservative gray outfit. "Too boring, too flashy, just no." Finally, in a small boutique owned by a Vietnamese woman who recognized Maya from TV and immediately offered a discount, they found it. A deep purple dress with delicate silver embroidery along the neckline. Simple, elegant, and somehow both modest and striking. "That's the one," Nurse Chen said decisively. "You'll look like royalty, not like you're trying to be 20 again." The dress cost more than Maya would typically spend on clothes in 6 months, but with the hospital collection, she could afford it. As the shopkeeper wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, Maya felt a strange mixture of guilt and excitement. Hal would have loved to see her like this, shopping for a special dress, preparing for a performance. He had always encouraged her to do more with her voice, to let herself want things. That night, Maya visited Luis in room 417. His condition had worsened, his thin body now connected to even more machines. But his eyes brightened when she entered. "The famous Maya Chen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, pulling a chair beside his bed. "Not famous. Tell that to my Instagram. I posted about knowing you and I got like 100 new followers." He grinned weakly. "Never thought I'd be friends with a celebrity." "We are friends then?" Maya asked softly. Luis nodded.
"Anyone who sings to me at 3 a.m. is definitely my friend." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the beeping of machines a familiar backdrop. "What will you sing for the finals?"
Luis finally asked. Maya hesitated. She hadn't told anyone her choice, partly from superstition, partly because it felt too personal. But looking at Luis, this brave boy who faced each day knowing it might be his last, she found herself wanting to share. "Bridge over troubled water," she said. Luis smiled. "That's my grandma's favorite song." "It reminds me of my husband," Maya admitted. "He was always—" "Hi, Bridge." Luis studied her face. "You miss him a lot." It wasn't a question, but Maya nodded anyway. "I think," Luis said slowly, "that's why your singing makes people cry. You're not just hitting notes. You're telling a story with your heart." Maya looked at the boy in surprise. How had someone so young become so wise? "Will you sing a little for me now?" Luis asked. "Just a preview?" Maya glanced at the door, then back at Luis. His eyes held a plea she couldn't refuse. She sang softly, just the first verse and chorus, her voice gentle in the quiet room. When she finished, Luis had tears on his hollow cheeks. "You're going to win," he said with absolute certainty. "And when you do, I want your autograph before everyone else starts asking." Maya left the hospital feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because of Luis's faith in her. Heavier because she could see how quickly he was fading. The night of the finals arrived cold and clear, stars unusually visible above the city lights. Maya arrived at the theater 2 hours early as instructed. Her new dress protected by a garment bag, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. Backstage was controlled chaos. Production assistants rushed about with clipboards and headsets. Makeup artists and hairstylists had been provided for the finalists. A young woman with blue-streaked hair led Maya to a chair and studied her face. "You have beautiful bone structure," she said. "We don't need to do much." Maya had never worn much makeup, just occasionally a touch of lipstick for special occasions. As the makeup artist worked, applying subtle colors to her eyes and cheeks, Maya barely recognized the face emerging in the mirror. Not because it looked dramatically different, but because it looked seen, cared for, attended to. The hairstylist was next, a young man with tattoo sleeves who clucked disapprovingly at her simple bun. "Let's take this down," he said, gently removing pins. Maya's hair fell to her shoulders, streaked with gray but still thick and healthy. "Perfect. We'll just add some soft waves, nothing too fussy." By the time they finished, Maya looked like a woman who belonged on a stage, elegant, poised, and somehow still herself. When she changed into the purple dress, a production assistant whistled. "You look amazing," she said. Maya thanked her, feeling like she was playing a role in a play about someone else's life. The other finalists were being similarly transformed. Raj, wearing a black shirt open at the collar, gave her a thumbs up from across the room. The young Whitney Houston singer complimented her dress. Everyone was kind, supportive, as if they had all become a strange sort of family in this brief, intense experience. 10 minutes to places," called the stage manager. Maya found a quiet corner and closed her eyes, trying to center herself. She thought of Hao, of his unwavering belief in her. She thought of Luis fighting for each breath yet still finding joy in music. She thought of all the hospital rooms where she had sung over the years, never imagining it would lead to this moment. "You okay?" It was Raj, concern in his dark eyes. Maya nodded. "Just nervous, don't be. Everyone already loves you." He hesitated, then added, "My cousin texted. She said the whole oncology floor is having a viewing party. They've got a TV in the common room." Maya pictured Luis watching, perhaps too weak now to sit up without help. The thought steadied her. Whatever happened tonight, she would sing for him, for all the people who had listened when she thought no one could hear. Places, everyone. As Maya took her position in the wings, waiting for her turn to perform, she felt strangely calm. Win or lose, she had already found something she thought was lost forever. Her voice, and with it a piece of herself. I've written part 4 of Maya's story, focusing on the days leading up to the finals and her preparation for the big performance. This section develops the narrative through the community's reaction to her semi-final performance, including the newspaper article 2, the hospital staff's support and financial contribution for a new outfit 3, her shopping experience with Nurse Chen and finding the perfect dress 4, a meaningful visit with Luis, where she reveals her song choice for the finals 5, her transformation backstage before the finals, being styled professionally, learning that the oncology floor is having a viewing party to watch her perform. Story continues to build emotional momentum while maintaining simple language and authentic human connections. I've kept the content appropriate for YouTube policies and avoided using the names you mentioned. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this section before moving on to the final part? I'll write the final part 5 of Maya's story in about 1,400 words with simple English and an engaging tone. I'll bring her journey to a meaningful conclusion while maintaining the human-centric approach with natural language and keeping the content YouTube-friendly. I'd part 5 story type, text markdown, title, the audience laughed when she walked out. But one performance made everyone cry. Part 5. The studio lights were blinding as Maya took her place at center stage. The theater was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, camera crews positioned strategically throughout. This wasn't just a local event anymore. Word had spread about the singing janitor, and now regional news stations had sent reporters. Maya stood very still, trying to remember how to breathe. Her purple dress caught the light, the silver embroidery sparkling slightly. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical bun, fell in soft waves around her face. She looked different, felt different than she had just weeks ago when she first walked onto this stage and people had laughed. No one was laughing now. The host, even more enthusiastic than before, introduced her with a flourish. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman who has captured Cincinnati's heart, Maya Chen. The applause was thunderous, startling in its intensity. Maya gave a small nod of acknowledgement, still uncomfortable with this kind of attention. Maya will be singing Bridge Over Troubled Water, the host announced before exiting the stage. The lights dimmed slightly. In the sudden hush, Maya closed her eyes, centering herself. She thought of Hao, his kind eyes, his unwavering belief in her, the way he had held her hand through every hardship. She thought of Luis watching from his hospital bed, and all the patients who had listened to her sing over the years when she thought no one was paying attention. The first piano notes floated through the air, gentle and familiar. Maya opened her eyes and began to sing. When you're weary, feeling small. Her voice was soft at first, almost fragile, filling the theater with a quiet intimacy that made hundreds of people lean forward in their seats. She didn't use fancy vocal runs or dramatic gestures. She simply stood there, letting the words flow through her with a sincerity that couldn't be faked. As the first verse flowed into the chorus, something shifted. Maya's voice grew stronger, richer, carrying decades of experience, of hard work and disappointment, of love and loss, of dreams deferred but never abandoned. This wasn't just a song. It was her life distilled into melody. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. In the audience, people sat perfectly still, many with tears streaming openly down their faces. The judges watched, transfixed. Even the camera operators, professionals who had seen countless performances, seemed moved. Their equipment steady, but their expressions emotional. The second verse began, and Maya's voice took on a new quality, a warmth and power that seemed to reach every corner of the theater. She wasn't performing anymore. She was communicating, telling her story to each person as if they were the only one in the room. As the music swelled toward the climax, Maya allowed herself to really feel the lyrics, to remember how Hao had been her bridge, how she had been a bridge for the patients she sang to, how music itself had been a bridge carrying her through the darkest moments of her life. Sail on, Silver Girl, sail on by. Her voice soared, years of singing in empty hospital corridors having built a strength and control that formal training might never have given her. There was something in her tone that spoke of resilience, of surviving storms and still finding beauty in the world. As she approached the final chorus, Maya thought of Luis again. She had learned that morning that he had been moved to intensive care, his condition critical. This performance might be the last thing of hers he would ever hear. The thought filled her with both sadness and determination to make it count. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will ease your mind. The final note hung in the air, pure and perfect before fading into silence. For several heartbeats, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire theater was suspended in a moment outside of time. Then, like a wave breaking, the audience erupted. People leapt to their feet, applauding with an intensity that seemed to make the building itself vibrate. Some were shouting, others crying, many doing both. The judges stood as well, their usual professional distance abandoned in the face of what they had just witnessed. Maya stood still in the storm of approval, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Not because of the applause, but because for the first time since Hao died, she had felt him close, as if her voice had somehow built a bridge to wherever he was now. The host had to wait nearly 2 minutes for the audience to quiet enough for the judges to speak. When they finally did, their comments were unlike their usual polished feedback. "I've been doing this for 15 years, said the producer, his voice thick with emotion. "And I have never been so moved by a performance. That wasn't just singing. That was humanity, distilled into sound." The former boy band member, usually quick with jokes, simply said, "Thank you for reminding all of us why music matters." The female judge, openly crying, added, "Some people sing notes. Some people sing songs. But you, Maya, you sing life itself." Maya nodded her thanks, unable to speak. As she left the stage, legs trembling, a production assistant handed her a tissue and whispered, "My grandmother has Alzheimer's. She doesn't recognize me anymore. But she was watching at the nursing home and they just texted me that she's been singing along. Thank you." Backstage was a blur of congratulations and emotions. The other contestants embraced her, all sense of competition seemingly forgotten. Raj gave her a gentle fist bump, his eyes shining with admiration. "That wasn't a performance," he said. "That was a gift." Maya smiled through her tears, overwhelmed by it all. When the time came for all 10 finalists to return to the stage for the results, she almost didn't want to go. Whatever happened now, whether she won or lost, felt secondary to what she had already experienced. The host drew out the announcement with practiced dramatic pauses. "The third-place winner of Heartland's Got Talent is Raj Patel in his original song." Raj grinned, accepting his trophy with a gracious bow. Maya squeezed his arm as he passed, genuinely happy for him. "The runner-up is Whitney Williams with her tribute to the great Whitney Houston." The young woman beamed, blowing kisses to the audience as she accepted her prize. That left Maya and a teenage dance group as the final 2 contenders. She stood calmly, hands folded in front of her, while the dancers held hands, their young faces tense with anticipation. And the winner of this year's Heartland's Got Talent, receiving $50,000 and a recording contract, is... The host paused for what felt like an eternity. Maya Chen. The roar from the audience was deafening. The dance group surrounded Maya in a spontaneous group hug before she could even process what had happened. Confetti rained from the ceiling. The host pressed a large check and a trophy into her hands. Cameras flashed. It was chaos, beautiful and overwhelming. Maya stood at the center of it all, smiling through tears, trying to find words. When the host finally asked how she felt, she spoke softly, her accent more pronounced under stress. "I am grateful," she said simply. "My husband always believed in my voice even when I did not. He passed away 1 year ago today. This was for him. And for a brave young man at the hospital who reminded me that music can build bridges even when we feel most alone." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Later that night, long after the cameras had stopped rolling, Maya sat alone in her tiny apartment, still wearing her purple dress, the oversized check and trophy propped against the wall. She should have felt elated, triumphant. Instead, she felt oddly quiet inside, as if she had emptied herself completely and was waiting to see what would fill the space. Her phone rang, her old flip phone, not the new smartphone the recording company had already promised to provide. It was Dr. Patel from the oncology floor. "Maya," she said gently, "I thought you should know. Luis watched your performance. The whole floor did. He was so happy when you won.
He kept saying, "I told you so" to everyone.
He passed away 20 minutes ago. It was peaceful. His last evening was filled with beauty thanks to you. Maya closed her eyes, fresh tears falling. Thank you for telling me, she whispered. After hanging up, she went to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere in Cincinnati General, a body was growing cold, a spirit gone. Somewhere else, new life was entering the world, first cries filling a delivery room. And everywhere in between, people were living, struggling, loving, grieving, all the messy, beautiful complexity of human existence. Maya thought of all the hospital rooms she had cleaned over the years, all the lives she had briefly touched with her voice without fully realizing it. She thought of Hao, who had seen in her what she couldn't see in herself. She thought of Luis, whose brief life had somehow helped her reclaim her own. The $50,000 would change her life. The recording contract would open doors she had never imagined walking through. But standing there in her window, Maya understood that she had already received the greatest gift. She had found her voice again. Not just for singing, but for living. Tomorrow would bring interviews and decisions and changes. But tonight, Maya simply stood at her window and sang softly to the city below, not for applause or recognition, but for the pure joy of letting her voice travel wherever it needed to go, like a bridge spanning the troubled waters of human experience, connecting heart to heart in the darkness. I've written the final part 5 of Maya's story, bringing her journey to an emotional and meaningful conclusion. This section completes the narrative through here. Her powerful final performance of Bridge Over Troubled Water, and the profound audience reaction to the judge's deeply emotional responses to her singing, her victory in the competition, winning the grand prize for the bittersweet news of Luis's peaceful passing after watching her win 5. Maya's reflective moment alone, understanding that rediscovering her voice, both literally and figuratively, is the greatest gift she's received, a sense of both closure and new beginnings as she contemplates the changes ahead. The story maintains simple language and authentic human connections throughout, with natural dialogue and emotional depth. I've kept the content appropriate for YouTube policies and avoided using the names you mentioned while creating a conclusion that feels meaningful, rather than artificial. The ending balances the triumph of Maya's win with the poignancy of Luis's passing, reflecting the complexity of human experience and providing an emotionally satisfying conclusion to her journey. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this final section?